3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez, and you are listening to the very first ever 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Super stoked to bring this to you guys. So every week we'll be doing this long form audio and video podcast. It will be an audio form on iTunes. You can head over to our YouTube channel or 3dmusclejourney.com to check out the video as well. We are going to be doing group discussions every week, somewhere between 45 minutes, hour and a half, somewhere-ish in there, and talking about topics that matter to us. We like to keep this as a discussion between coaches. I hope you guys would like to join us as kind of a fly on the wall as we, dive into topics that aren't necessarily always touched on within our sports of bodybuilding, powerlifting, all that jazz. And we're going to be doing something a little bit different for these first few episodes, though. So you can get used to hearing 3 coaches per episode, just kind of bantering together. But every other episode, for the first 10, you will be listening to an interview, a very in-depth interview of me talking to one of the 4 male coaches on our team. And then at the end of that, actually, Eric will be interviewing me. So today, we're being joined by Eric Helms, and I will just be grilling him on everything about him. We're talking about everything from where he grew up, how he learned what he knows now, his first job, his time in the military, his PhD, his current studies, his future goals, his plans as an athlete, and everything in between. So thank you guys so much for listening and watching, and please enjoy this conversation with Eric Helms. Okay, I think we're set. Eric Helms, we're going to learn about you. Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
So ready? Okay, so let's start with you telling me about where you are now, currently. Where do you live? Who do you live with? What is your work?
Who do I live with? I live a large number of living creatures. There is Milo, there's Bucky, and there's also Barbara. So that's my 2 cats and my wife.
Who came third? I'll tell her.
Well, she would put me third too. So, yeah.
Okay.
So we're the proud pet parents of Milo and Bucky. We live in Auckland, New Zealand, which for all the Americans out there is not part of Australia. That is a country off the southeastern coast of Australia. It's where they film Lord of the Rings. It's also where they do some pretty badass sports science. And I came out here to do my PhD in strength and conditioning in August 2012. So I've been here almost 4 years now.
Okay. How far do you have left?
Well, let's see. I came out, the first year I got here, I did what's called an MPhil, which is a Master's of Philosophy, which is a degree they pretty much only have for Americans or other foreign people who are coming there who want to do a PhD, who don't have research experience, but have a lot of coursework done.
Okay.
So, big tangent, but basically the way the system works in the UK, Australia, New Zealand is when you get to the PhD point, you're only doing research. So it's a degree by research. To get into a degree by research, you have to have research experience. So I had already a master's that was only coursework, no thesis. Came here, did an MPhil, which is a 1-year research degree. That's where I did all my protein research stuff, and did that for a year, and then had some time to collect my thoughts, submit my PhD application. Started my PhD in March 2014, and I have just about 11 months left.
Okay.
10 months.
We're going to rewind all the way back to that point. Is that cool? But we're going to start from, where he was born. Where are you from?
Where was I born?
Mm-hmm. Where are you born? Where did the Helms start is what I need to know.
I was born in Children's Hospital in Oakland, California, on the border of Berkeley. The son of 2 parents.
Yes.
An only child.
Oh, there were 2. Okay.
Yep. Tim and Bonnie Helms, married at the time, divorced when I was 3. A healthy divorce. I had 2 cats growing up. I was born in Oakland, California.
Okay.
And lived there most of my life until I joined. Well, that's not true. I went to high school outside of Sacramento, but I lived in the greater Northern California area until I joined the Air Force when I was 18.
Okay. Now, I want to know how you became the natty bodybuilder. So did you play sports growing up? Let's talk about you as an athlete. How was that?
Sort of. So I got into like martial arts and t-ball and Pee Wee League baseball as a kid. Wasn't really that athletic. I did karate from like I was like 5 till I was 14 before I moved to Sacramento to do high school. Um, and
What kind of martial arts? I need to know.
Ishinryu karate,
Yeah.
which is an Okinawan form of karate.
Okay.
And no, I did that for like 9 years, and it was good. I think that probably had a lot to do with my early development. We emphasized. I mean, it was very little actual like teaching of like we didn't spar much. We learned forms, we learned history, we learned like respect and exercising and all that stuff. I think it was probably good for my formative years, looking back on it now. Um, and very very cool sensei Pam Ren. She was one of the first, I think, at the time fifth and then sixth dan, which is a degree of black belt in
Okay.
Ishinu karate, who was a woman. So she was pretty badass. She's like 4'11" and could just whoop anybody's butt. Uh, and just a good person too. So it's pretty cool. Anyway, so that was my very limited athletic background as a young kid. In high school, I think I just wanted to be accepted and be cool.
Who
So I
doesn't?
tried to, yeah, right. I tried to play the sports because I heard that that's a cool thing to do. Let's see. So I ran track my first year. Didn't choose the right sport to be cool. Um, no offense to all you track athletes out there. I think you're cool. Um, and I wanted to run the 100 meters because that's what cool people do. They run
Obviously.
fast. And the coaches were like, "So here's the thing: you're not fast, so you should try a different event." And I was like, "All right, I'll try the 200." And they're like, "So you're still not fast, but if you can maintain that pace for a full lap, maybe we could give you a shot at that." So I ran the 400 meters in high school, all 4 years. Did pretty well. I was on the 4x4 team, and we made it to. Did we make it to state or do we make it to sections? I can't remember. We did pretty well. I think my best split was a 51.7. My best individual was a 52 point something. Um, so I was a decent middle distance slash long distance sprinter. 400 meters is kind of that cutoff for sprinting in middle
And a
distance.
straight gut check. 400's
Uh,
terrible, dude. I had to do some the other day.
Hate it. Worst race ever.
So did
Um,
you love track or you did it because straight coolness factor?
Hated it. Absolutely hated it.
Well, did you love karate?
I enjoyed karate. I
Okay.
did.
And why did you
But
stop then?
not in the same way. Not in the same way. Oh well, I moved. That was the main
Okay.
thing.
Okay.
I actually tried to get back into some martial art. I did taekwondo, but it was super like Americanized bad. Like you signed a contract, so you get a black belt in 2 years, no matter what.
What?
It was bad. So I stopped after a few months, broke the contract. Um, it just wasn't the same. Like we used to like read like stuff from like Bushido code and like meditate and do all this cool stuff when I was a kid and learn about Japanese culture and then when we did the taekwondo, it was kind of like this is this is elbow drop move, and then let's spar for 2 hours, and hey, next week you can get your next belt. And I was just kind of like, it felt like Rex Kwon Do from freaking Napoleon Dynamite, you know?
It sounded like it too a little bit. That was a good voice. I liked it.
Yeah, thank you. That actually was my Rex Kwon Do voice. So wasn't a huge fan of it. I'm not. I don't want to like diss the that whole thing, and I'm sure there's some very good martial artists in
Well,
it, but it
yeah,
wasn't.
it's
It
just
wasn't
it
for
was
me.
your experience with it just wasn't incredible at that time. So
That
you ran the
meant,
track and then you hated that.
yeah, I also played 1 year of football as a sophomore, and absolutely hated that too. And I wasn't very good either. I think that's the thing is I wasn't. I had some raw athletic ability, like I could run,
Okay.
um, like but I didn't care or like it or enjoy it really. I wasn't a very physical. Like I liked to play. I think that's why I got into
Ah.
bodybuilding and lifting weights is because at a certain point I realized I just loved it, and that was it became enjoyment for me. But
So
no, I didn't really.
it never started because of competing then. Like as far as you lifting. It was never was it in football?
A little bit, very little
Okay.
bit. My track coach actually, Kevin Morning, he was a really good guy, and he was always trying to get me to push myself to what my probably my actual potential was. He was like, "I want you to start lifting weights. I want you to, pay attention to what you're eating." And because I would not lift weights and like I wouldn't eat the entire day before I ran
Oh
track because
Jesus.
it would make me nervous. So I'd go on like a 24-hour fast and then have to run. the 4x1, and the 4x4, and I couldn't understand why I would fall down and at the end of a race or throw up or feel terrible. I think if I had actually, I mean, this is always true of everyone. If I had known what I know now about nutrition and strength conditioning, I could have actually been a pretty good 400-meter runner. I was running with some guys who did pay attention to that stuff, did lift weights, and were much more disciplined at a younger age than I ever was, and they were, very good and did very well athletically because of that. So anyway, yeah, it wasn't really competition or team sports wasn't really something that I ever participated in as a kid. I did like pushing myself, and I liked being physical.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, when I joined the Air Force, I did very well as far as my like the equivalent of a PT score.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same as it is in the Army, but that's probably the easiest way to people understand it. And I actually volunteered and participated in like the physical conditioning staff and acted as a mentor to other airmen who didn't do well with PT, which is basically it's kind of a not a great program. You take someone who has a high PT score, you pair them with someone who has a low PT score, and they go train together. So
Solid.
it's right, yeah, which
So,
can be really really embarrassing with the rank system because I could be like a senior airman or a airman first class, which is like a private basically, and they might pair me with like a tech sergeant, someone who's been in for like 10 years, and they have to like listen to me and run with me, and they're like this freaking 19-year-old, I hate you, kind of thing. Like,
so you went out of high school straight in, like, how did you just brought up Air Force multiple times? How did you get there? When did you get there?
yeah, so for the longest time, I wanted to get into law enforcement or counterintelligence and join the FBI. That was
So when
like
you were
my,
growing up, you thought
yeah,
that. Okay.
I wanted to be a cop. I wanted to be like a super soldier cop, like save the world guy. Um, so from when I was like 5 till I was really initially in the Air Force, that was kind of my goal, was to work in that arena. And I actually set myself up pretty well. I joined the Air Force as a linguist, which is it's called a cryptologic Arabic linguist. Um,
And you
so
picked that, or you went into like, I want to join the Air Force. What do y'all need? Like, how does that whole thing?
you can do that. I did not. I did my research,
Not
and I knew
surprising.
that, right, if you don't come in and have a guaranteed job slot, they're going to put you where the hell they want to put you. So I actually initially came in. I wanted to be security police, which is basically like a cop in the Air Force, like an MP, because I knew that the FBI liked military experience and they liked police experience. So I figured I'd get two in one, and I scored relatively well on the ASVAB, just kind of like your IQ test for getting in the military and seeing where your predilections lie. And my recruiter was like, who actually was a security police guy when he was not a recruiter, was like, no, you don't want to do this. You're gonna be guarding gates all day. You scored high. Let's have you take other tests. And he's like, do you want to do like computer security? And I was like, no. And he was like, well, there's also this whole thing called being a linguist, and you get to work in intel and like counter, like you could. And he didn't really know what he was talking about because he wasn't one, but he like looked it up and he's like, basically they teach you another language and you translate and transcribe and decode, and you're trying to get intelligence on other countries or stuff like that. If you go learn Spanish, maybe you work in counter drugs. If you go learn Arabic, you can work in counterterrorism, all that stuff. And I was like, wow, that's actually probably a much better pathway to get into the FBI, is working in intelligence and learning a foreign language and getting military experience. So I took the test, and eventually that was I signed a contract to have that be my career in the Air
That's
Force.
awesome. Okay, so you were 18.
I was 18. Yes.
Okay. And Eric is the athlete. He came in, he did cool in his PT thing. And like, where does the Arabic linguist and natural bodybuilder powerlifter, like,
So,
fill me in there, will you?
so within 6 months of being in the Air Force, and I realized, man, I don't want to do this.
Okay.
Base training was great. I learned a lot of things. If I could go back in time, I would do it again. It made me who I am. I learned a lot of discipline, met some great people. But I joined in August of 2001.
Okay.
So literally a month later, and during basic training, 9/11 happened.
Damn.
Yeah. So I was in basic training during 9/11, which is a pretty crazy experience.
I bet.
And I joined in a relative time of peace. Um, it had been not much going on since the Gulf War or Kosovo, that kind of stuff. Um, and I wasn't like I went on the front lines or anything like that. It just I was very uncomfortable with the way we reacted to 9/11, and that we spent a lot more resources in Iraq and Afghanistan. Anyway, so I don't want to get into politics or anything like that, but
Yeah.
I I just realized that I didn't feel like I had a lot of agency in my own life. I did enjoy serving my country, and I think that's a very valuable thing to do in life, and I'm proud of that. Um, but I realized that I just didn't really want to actually be a someone who was in counterintelligence or the military. It wasn't really where my passion was lied anymore, and
And you can't just get
I think
out,
correct.
right? I
So
mean, okay.
and and I wouldn't want to anyway. I didn't come from a family that had money, so they couldn't really afford to send me to school. I would have had to go to like a JC and then rack up a bunch of debt and go to school anyway. And I didn't know what I wanted to study. Um, the good side of being in the Air Force is that they give you the GI Bill, so a ton of money for school afterwards. Um, and I knew that even if I didn't like what I was doing, it was a very viable career. Learning Arabic and I mean, it was in getting I got a security clearance. So like I could have been set for life if I wanted to stay in the same area. Um, so anyway, fast forward through my training, fast forward through doing my job. I'm about, oh, I want to say 6 to 8 months, maybe a year out of finishing my enlistment, knowing that I'm going to get out, but not knowing what I want to do. I was actually into like breakdancing and hip hop at the time, and I realized that wasn't going to
Yes.
be a career.
I can't wait to talk about that in a little bit. I won't make
Oh
you do
well,
it. I won't make you do it. I won't. But just so y'all know, MC Eric. Wait, what was your name?
well, hold on.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, I just get real excited. Okay,
Highly irrelevant
dude,
to the
kind of
conversation.
relevant. It's in your
It's, well,
soul.
it is in my soul. I
I
do like
know.
music, and if you
Okay.
want to see me,
Okay,
you know,
so that's what we're doing. We're hip hopping and things.
right, realizing loving it, but realizing it's not a career. And so anyway, I was in a long distance relationship, and without getting into too much detail for the confidentiality of me and my prior significant other, um, she had something pretty tragic happen to her, and I could not visit her because I was technically deployed. On paper, I was in a different unit, even though I was in the same base. Couldn't take leave for 6 months, and just felt incredibly powerless to help her.
Hmm.
And if anything, I was trending towards doing self-destructive things to deal with that. There's a huge drinking culture in the Air Force, just like the just like college,
Yeah.
and or just being destructive or violent, or like I didn't go crazy or go too far, but I saw that I needed some kind of outlet to deal with it. Um, so I got my buddy who'd been lifting weights for a while, was into bodybuilding, had Arnold Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, and I was like, dude, let's you know train me, make me a bodybuilder kind of
Right.
thing.
Turn me
Um,
into Arnold because it's totally doable.
right, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
obviously.
Yeah. So then I had the goal of just trying to get as big as strong as possible from around 2000. I want to say I started lifting weights in 2004, mid year.
Okay.
And the first workout, we went to the gym on base, and it was a leg day, and we were doing sets of 10 on deadlifts. And on my last set, I strained my back, went outside, and threw up. And I realized that I loved it.
I mean, that sounds like love at first sight. It's typically what happens.
So I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I had so much I don't know, angst and
Hmm.
stuff to work through. I think it started with as a very kind of healthy pursuit, motivated by something unhealthy, you know.
Right.
Uh, but it, like basic training, but in a probably a harder and more greater degree, bodybuilding, especially competitive bodybuilding down the track, made me realize just how much I could tap into my own potential and show myself that I was capable of much more than I thought I was. Um, and became very addictive to me. I got quote unquote bit by the iron bug
Mm-hmm.
almost immediately from lifting
Mm-hmm.
weights, and it gave me kind of this constant driving goal that would never go away, that you can never quite reach either. To just keep pushing towards, and this constant feedback of potential progress. And when you get stuck, you've got to figure it out, which I found very intellectually interesting too.
Okay, so when you say I loved it, it was like, all right, I'm gonna be Arnold, I'm gonna compete, all that stuff, or is it like I need to do this every day to make me feel less angry about other things, kind of thing? Like, was it just Eric get better, or was it all right, Eric, let's become a bodybuilder?
I think I just started. I wanted to see progress. I wanted to be stronger. I wanted to be bigger. I wanted to deal with anger, and have a healthier outlet, and just kind of have some kind of pursuit. I don't think I didn't ever really think about competing until say 2006, I want to say, which is the year
So,
before I started.
okay, so that's a couple years of just
Yeah,
wanting to get better.
right. I mean, I was on the bodybuilding.com forums around 2005. I looked at competing. I thought about it, but I had never really seriously considered. I had never even gone to a bodybuilding show yet. I hadn't seen it. Um, so I was in and around the culture, and I knew there were competitive bodybuilders, and I respected it, but I didn't really know about it until really 2006. I went to I got interested in it, and then I went to I like guest judged at a INBF show in
That was
Georgia.
your first show you guest judged?
Yeah, so I
Oh
became
my Lord.
the first show that I watched,
Ah,
right?
okay, yeah.
So yeah, okay, we'll talk bodybuilding. So I got once I found I loved it so much, and I was really interested in bodybuilding and powerlifting. That was kind of where I started to find my interest, with strength and size kind of thing. Um, I was like, well, a viable career could be personal training. I was almost at the end of my enlistment. I could have gotten a job with the NSA, uh, doing what I was doing basically in the Air Force, but as a contractor.
Okay,
And I turned down that job to be a personal trainer at the local YMCA, for minimum wage, basically.
naturally.
Um, at this time, Barb was still my wife. Barbara
Mm-hmm.
was. I met her in the Air Force. She was also an Arabic linguist. She was still in, and we had only been together for 3 or 4 months. And if I had gotten the job at the NSA, I would have had to move to Washington D.C. and work there. And I decided, you know what? A, I don't want to do this. B, I don't want to take what seems like a really awesome relationship and make it long distance. That doesn't seem like a good idea. And I'm really liking this weightlifting thing. So when I got out, I went on unemployment for a while, because you can once you get out, and I studied for my ISSA personal trainer, or certified fitness trainer. I got a PT certification,
Right. Okay.
and then I used that to get a job at the YMCA. Did my interview, trying to play up the point that I had been in the Air Force and did PT there, and they hired me, and it was a very very kind of like bottom of the rung PT gig. I started with just being PT staff kind of thing, like cleaning up things, spotting people, saying hello to members, and then started getting clients and started doing really well with it. Um, and my first competitive experience was, and this is what got me interested in competition actually, because there wasn't just bodybuilding, it's powerlifting. 2006, they put on I want to say in August, just a gym funded push pull. So I
Okay.
competed that was the first thing I did. So I was like, once they decided to actually do that, I was like, oh, I'm all about it. And I trained for it. I was benching and deadlifting on like a lot at that point. And, I competed in my first unsanctioned push pull powerlifting meet in mid 2006. Um, and then I was like, well, I could also compete in bodybuilding. And there was a guy at the gym, former Mr. Alaska from way back in the day,
Oh wow.
who actually really encouraged me to get into competitive bodybuilding. And I would say probably um, part of the reason why I'm here today in many ways. So big shout out there. But he was just like, you got a good physique. More importantly, I think you have the right heart and mindset for this type of thing. Um, and I was I was not really aware of the differences between natural and non-natural bodybuilding at the
Mm-hmm.
time, and I was honestly, I was kind of like talking myself into, well, if I want to do bodybuilding, those IFBB guys are on a bunch of gear and they're all like roided out. I was considering that path, and I was like, I don't really know if I want to do that. Like that's a lot more than just a little, and I was dabbling in pro hormones a little bit in 2005,
I
2006
had no
over the
idea.
counter.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. This is something that yeah, I've mentioned I mentioned it in the Powercast with Mark Bell. I've talked about a long time. I'm very open about because I think it's an important thing for people to realize that everyone comes from different backgrounds, and what brings people to natural bodybuilding is varied. But anyway, so we're talking over a decade ago now. I had and it for those who are young, 2005, 2006, you could literally go to bodybuilding.com and just buy a pro hormone online. It was very easy to do, no big deal. Um, so I had really just dabbled with them in a little bit. We're talking like a 3 week period or a 4 week period, and and but kind of the point was I was kind of thinking like, well, I'm going to try to try to go down that IFBB route. And anyway, this guy who's Mr. Alaska was like, hey, you need to check out this INBF show, and and this was maybe 6 to 8 months after that period. Sat down and checked it out. And he was like, we actually need judges and guest judges. And I started learning about it, and I went online, learned about it, found out what natural bodybuilding is. And I went, oh, wow, there's a way to compete that isn't the IFBB and isn't, at the time, the Ronnie Coleman kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know what? I like that. I want to do that. And decided from that point I wanted to be a natural bodybuilder. And went to guest judge, did really well. Basically, the way it works to get new judges for an organization, and at least in the INBF at that time in Georgia, you have to have within something like 90% of the same scores as the 5 or 7 certified judges, right? So I did really well on bodybuilding and really bad on figure. So I didn't get certified, and I shouldn't have been, because honestly, it was the
Yeah.
first time I'd been to the show. I was also test judging, but it was very mom and pop and small. But I remember shaking the hands of the guy who won and just seeing the show and just thinking it was very cool. I met Rodney Hilaire, who was putting on the show at the time, who, for people who've been following the INBF, WNBF for a long time, he was heavyweight champ in the WNBF Worlds in the mid 2000s for a while. Very good bodybuilder. Just found myself very inspired by it. And I was like, you know what? I want to do a show next year, 2007. And that was when we moved back to California. So I contacted NGA, INBA, and INBF, WNBF, and was like, hey, here's my background and history. Depending on the organization, banned substance lists are different. So I contacted INBF, WNBF, and I was like, hey, here's what I took. Is it banned? Is it not? When can I compete? And they said, hey, that is banned, but we have a 2-year rule for pro hormones that are bought over the counter. So you can compete in 2008 or something like that. I think it's what they said. I had to wait 2 years. And then INBA wasn't banned at the time. They were like, if you're not currently taking it, you compete. And I think the NGA also wasn't banned at the time. But anyway, so I did an NPC show and an INBA show. And those were my first 2 shows in 2007 in May. And that was after we'd moved back to California after Barb had gotten out of the Air Force. Okay. And I was working as a personal trainer.
Wowzers. Okay, so then did you always have powerlifting ambitions like concurrently with that, or was that a separate, like did they grow up together? Were you like, I'm going to bodybuild, and then like, well, I guess I need something in the off season? Like, where did yours intersect?
Yeah. Well, I did that powerlifting meet first, the
YMCA thing.
The YMCA push-pull in 2006. I loved it, and it was awesome. Very cool, and really drove me to be interested in developing strength and training that way. So I actually was investigating and reading and learning about. So this whole time, as much as I was excited about it as an athlete, I was excited about it as a trainer, and I was following Lane Norton online and a few others once I got involved, and I was like, that's really cool, the idea of coaching and working with bodybuilders. And powerlifters. So I started from that point right around 2006, 2007. I was like, you know what? I want to take my education and mold it towards eventually being a bodybuilding coach. So that was an intentional stance I took. So I very much fell in love with the science and the application and the theory behind it all at the same time as being an athlete competing. So, I was working as a personal trainer this whole time. I was a personal trainer from 2005 till 2010 when I made 3DMJ my full-time gig.
So you, throughout that time, when you say I'm on the bodybuilding.com forums, that's Lane, Berto. Who else do we know now that you were talking to back then?
Oh man.
Right, it was all you guys.
Well, there's some have fallen off, some are still there, but Paul Revelia was on there, Lane Norton. So I should use their screen name. So we had Straight Flexed was Lane Norton, Father Flex was Berto. I was Quelly, which is part of it's comes from my old rap name.
Naturally.
And let's see who else was on there.
Alan Aragon, no?
Yeah, Alan was on there definitely. He was a moderator, so that was where I started to follow his stuff. Alan Aragon I started following early on, but yeah, it was a pretty cool community. There was a contest prep section on the bodybuilding.com forums where people would basically just log their whole contest prep and get support from one another. A bunch of people competing in natural bodybuilding. That was where I met Berto. Actually, we did our first show together, the 2007 INBA Silver and Black in Oakland. So that was pretty cool.
And you guys didn't know Jeff, right? It was just you two bodybuilders. We met online, right. Sort of like Tinder, but not really, right? I'm just kidding. And y'all just like
Grinder.
I know. And then, and then y'all decided, you know what, we're going to compete together. So then you met online first, and then you're like, all right, let's do the show together. And then y'all are besties, and here we are. Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah. Long story short, but yeah. But anyway, to answer your question from the very start, because I did powerlifting and I was training, I got very interested in both powerlifting and competitive bodybuilding. And I thought very early on that some of the ways that bodybuilders were training didn't make a lot of sense. And there was a lot of things that powerlifters were doing right that could be applied to bodybuilding.
And that was controversial at the time, correct? Like, did people agree with you, or they're like, this guy, get him out of here?
No, I mean, it's funny how the pendulum swings. Like it started with they're totally separate. You either train for strength or size, and they can actually be counterproductive to one another. More so that powerlifting hurts bodybuilding. And then now it's swung so far that you have people who don't want to compete in powerlifting, but think they have to do squat, bench, and deadlift, and they have to do like 1RMs. Mm-hmm. And so it's funny. I always find myself trying not to chase the pendulum and just give good information, because people are just creating these counter messages and creating these silly trends. But anyway, at the time it was very controversial. You don't want to thicken your waist, with those squats and heavy deadlifts. You get different kind of muscle if you lift heavy. It's dense, but it doesn't pop as much, like Arnold used to say. You don't need to worry about how much you lift. Come on, you're just trying to, build muscle. You just got to focus on the squeeze, and, a lot of messages coming from guys who aren't necessarily incorporating progressive overload, but more like progressive dosage increase to get the size. So it very, very confusing stuff. But when I started reading and learning and thinking about it and looking at the roots of what causes muscle growth and starting to question some of the science at the time, like the hormone hypothesis of the whole reason you train is to get these elevations in growth hormone. Yeah, right. And I just was like, I really don't think that it's all just about that. So yeah, I started to look into the mechanical roots of hypertrophy and thinking there should probably be some heavy lifting involved here, and an emphasis on progressive overload and periodization, which is very uncommon in bodybuilding at the time. So.
And then you were not coached yet, correct? Like when you're going into that 2007 season.
No, my 2007 season, I used an article written by Lane Norton that I found online, plus a whole bunch of just-in-case decisions because I didn't know better. So the article is actually pretty good.
Was it the Ultimate Shredding Diet?
I honestly don't remember the name of the article, but it was an article that Lane wrote where basically you'd calculate your macros, how long you need a certain rate of weight loss, and it talked about some things. At the time, it was cutting edge. It's still quite good.
I think that's how I ran my first prep too, because Chris Voss and them were like, he has this article. I'm like, let's do it. So yeah, that's so funny.
And if I had just listened to that, and if I had known how to make good adjustments, and if I had a good head on my shoulders and wasn't just a complete novice, probably would have done okay. But what actually happened was I read everything, obsessed about everything, and confused the hell out of myself. So like I got to the point where I was eating every 2.5 hours because I didn't want muscle protein synthesis to come down, and I
Right.
wasn't combining carbs and fats because if you do that and you store fat at the meal, right? Uh,
Obviously. Everybody knows
making
that.
sure, yeah, making sure that I had casein or cottage cheese before bed.
Mhm.
Um, Making sure that I put a large amount of my carbohydrates post training and pre training. Probably need the waxy maize starch. Probably need 10 supplements that don't do anything, and probably need a solid, I think 275 grams of protein. At so yeah, a lot of or yeah, just under 1.5 grams per pound of protein.
Mhm.
Um, and I was doing hit sprints, sprained my hamstring. Uh, and so
That's
yeah,
not funny.
and just anytime the scale stalled at all, I would make a cut. I make a cut. I make a cut. Didn't know how to weigh in effectively, so I wasn't doing like a 7 day average. To actually, basically, I was chasing odd time of day or post like high calorie day weigh-ins or just water weight or just not being patient. Ended up on a whole lot of cardio, very low calories, and but doing okay. I got in pretty decent condition for my first time out. The funny thing is that Berto, because I kind of look a little more ectomorphic, um, Berto came in fat, like 10 pounds heavier than me, like 190 pounds on stage at his
Yeah,
first
and he's
show.
how much shorter than you?
He's like 5'9", I'm 6 foot,
Yeah.
right? So my stage weight back then is probably actually pretty close to what my stage weight is now. It's just I'm leaner now.
Hmm.
His stage weight is 160, so he was literally on stage like 25 to 30 pounds overweight. Um, and and we looked at ourselves back then. It's like, oh, you've got the slow metabolism. This is talking to Berto. You have trouble getting in shape, and I'm the easy guy who easily gets shredded, but I have trouble being big. And completely untrue. Came to find out in our second season. Basically, he did. I did it enough right with the diet where I got in good shape, and he was basically following this modified like keto approach, which was more like just eat all of the fat and all the protein and not really get into a calorie deficit that much. But so
Gotcha.
we both did everything in a very retarded way and thought some things differently about each other or about ourselves that ended up finding were completely not true of our physiology. Um, but yeah, that was our first competition experience together.
And then after 2007, when was your next competitive season?
2009. So 2007, I think Berto and I both realized, man, we did a lot of dumb stuff. Um, I noticed primarily in what happened to me after my season. I put on 48 pounds in 2 months after my first season.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Now, is that
I
I lost control, or is that, dude, I'm gonna bulk, you just wait, I'm gonna get huge in a good
lost
way?
control,
Okay.
definitely lost control. Tried to convince myself that it was bulking, but at a certain point, when you have binged uncontrollably 4 times in the same week, it's hard to argue that you're just gaining mass, bro.
Yeah.
Um, no, I literally, for the first time in my life, felt that I had a lack of control, and I kind of understood what an eating disorder or binge eating disorder might be.
Hmm.
Uh, and I was right on the verge of getting help before I started to actually just kind of finally, I guess my psychology, my physiology caught up. But man, did I do a lot of damage in the 2 months before I got there. Um, and I didn't understand that I could actually get fat. I'd always been a skinny kid, so I figured any mass I gained was muscle. And then I finally looked up, and I was like 226 pounds, with still the vast majority of the muscle loss I'd incurred from a silly prep. And I
Hmm.
was like, I'm actually fat right now. Like I look like crap,
Uh-huh.
and that motivated me. And I ended up spending the next on and off 6 month period dieting. So I had an 8 month period after my show where I dieted for 5 months to get in shape, where I was kind of spinning my wheels trying to diet off the rebound fat gain that I had.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, wow, I've got lot to learn, and I really want to help people do this in a healthier way. My wife Barb sat me down and said that was a terrible experience for me. Like, I'm glad you got on stage. I'm glad you
Yeah.
learned all that. You had a lot of fun, but you were completely obsessive when you weren't, making your meals or training or crying because you weren't losing fat or losing your mind. You were on the forums obsessively reading about stuff and making it worse.
Hmm.
And if you're going to keep doing that, that doesn't work for me, basically.
Yeah.
Um, and that was a turning point for me because I realized, oh wow, I'm being a bad husband and a bad competitor. Really, it's not even working that effectively.
Right.
Uh, so that really kind of spurred me towards Berto and I going, we need to take a more evidence-based, healthy, balanced approach to this, sustainable approach, really. We didn't even look at it. Like, some people are always like, oh, there's a compromise between being hardcore and being balanced. I'm like, no, I don't agree with that at all. I think if you're overly hardcore and extreme and don't have an approach that is balanced enough, you just will drop out of the sport. You won't be there 10 years from now. So that was really kind of, I guess, the seeds, at least for Berto and I, of 3DMJ, where we were trying to figure out a way to support the community, help people not have that same experience that we had. I think a lot of it for Berto was just finding a better way to do things. He worked with Lane Norton in 2008 and did really well. Won his pro card in 3 different organizations and got shredded. He was competing compared to the 190 he was on stage fat in 2007. He got down into the high 150s when he won his pro card, and he was shredded.
And that was
And
just
that
the
was,
very next year, right? Well, but then again, you suffered through your 2007 prep, and he was like not even really dieting. So like that was probably a
yeah.
different scenario for him to be able to compete the very next year compared to you.
He might have been suffering just because he was trying to ask his body to work in the exact opposite way that he now knows it does. Like, he was
Right.
eating a high fat, low carb diet, um, and he knows now that for him that's really not the way to go.
It's extreme
Uh,
opposite now, yeah.
yeah. And then after he got on stage at the INBA Silver and Black, he then decided to do a show in June. And he managed to lose like a solid 10 or 12 pounds from May to June
Hmm.
to do that, because he really wanted to kind of actually bring some good conditioning. And he got in much better shape. I want to say he competed like at low 180s or high 170s, but
Which looks
got
very
much
different.
sharper. Got much sharper. Looked like he belonged on stage a lot more. Neither one of us looked like we belonged on stage, to be honest. I had spilled myself over and was like emaciated, and he was uh, and covered in oil, by the way, too. Um, and he was just completely out of shape. Um, in my second show, I didn't spill and didn't over oil, and I looked quite good for the development I had at the time, and
Hmm.
all that. For what I could have looked like, I guess. And then Berto did pretty well at the NGA. I think he placed second or third in his class in 2007. But he realized, even after dropping to the 12 pounds, that he had like another 12 to 20 to lose. So he hired Lane, got shredded, kicked some ass. I saw that, and I went, you know what? I got decently lean. I need to get a little bit leaner, but really I need to put on size. And I just spent 8 months spinning my wheels. I'm not going to compete till 2009.
Right. And so then
Now,
did you think to work with Lane immediately? You were like, next time I do it, I'm going to work with someone?
yeah, that was exactly
Okay.
my thought. So I worked with Lane in 2009, um, and we realized, wow, I don't actually have an easy time getting shredded. I have a really, 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 really hard time getting shredded.
Hmm.
So
Now
it
that you
took
know what
me,
shredded is, as
correct,
opposed to,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I did pretty damn well on my own. I mean, I got to the point where I had everything except striated glutes. I had separated quads. I had some hamstrings coming through. Um, Maybe 7 or 8% body fat, like legit.
Hmm.
If 5% is crazy shredded, that's where I was. And then in 2009, it took me 30, man, not until the Washington was I coming in good shape. Um, so that was probably January to August. It took me until August to get in good shape, and then I did another show after that. I did 5 shows in a powerlifting meet in 2009.
Oh, my Lord.
I dieted for 39 weeks in total, which at that time was like unheard of.
Yeah.
That was right around the time people were starting to realize that, especially in natural bodybuilding, you needed to diet longer. The conditioning standard was getting higher. Um, yeah, and I was just short of getting my pro card in 2009. I got into uh, 2 overalls. Jeff Alberts was in both of those.
Mm-hmm.
And I also placed second to the overall winner in the last show I did. So that was Scott Kluth, who got his pro card at in September 2009 at the West Coast Classic. I can't remember the name of the show anymore, but anyway, did pretty well. Got in very good shape, but still, I just I probably needed to be bigger, harder, and just wait for the right people to show up as it goes in bodybuilding.
So on a
Not
personal
hard.
level, how did you get Barb to like? Did you feel like you finally got everything under control that year? That she was like, okay, we're good with this, or was it like you being crazy still? If you don't
It
mind me
was a lot
asking.
better. It's a
Okay.
lot better, but unfortunately, 2009 was a really, really difficult year personally in our lives.
Okay.
So my father died in February of 2009,
I'm
right in the
sorry.
middle of my prep. And we bought a home, and we had some other huge family issues in our extended family.
Mm-hmm.
I had some family members diagnosed with cancer. The economy had just crashed, 2009, right? So we went through 3 different people who owned the personal training studio I was at, and it almost closed a couple times. Very shady stuff happened. There was a month-long period where we weren't getting paid, and we weren't sure if we were going to get closed or not. So our financial situation was very shaky. Personal situation very shaky. I was emotionally wrecked because my dad died,
I'm sorry.
and so it's really hard to say how much I was crazy from prep or crazy from life, and I just happened to be prepping at the same time, which wasn't
Whoa.
ideal. Go.
There you are.
That's how I feel about it. Yeah.
If you're listening, Eric just dropped his computer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
He's just
so
emotional.
anyway,
Don't worry.
yes, that was a very, very rough year. So I think I handled it as good as I could have at that time given the circumstances. But it was primarily not the craziness that was there was not primarily bodybuilding driven.
And I think almost too, like some of us prepping makes everything easier at some like I feel like my first prep it was like at a decently dark time as well, and I feel like it kind of saved me through that. So, anyways, that was a side tangent that sometimes it helps and sometimes it gets in the way, and you see with athletes all the time.
Yeah.
People try to fix it with prep, fix life with a prep, whereas sometimes life is definitely hindered by a prep. So,
Yeah, and it probably went through both.
yeah.
I think early on when it gives you focus primarily and drive and purpose
Mm-hmm.
and compartmentalization, which I think is a huge part of it. That was very,
Yeah.
very positive. But then once I had been dieting for 6 months and was killing myself, and I was on less than 1,800 calories and like it's very difficult for me to get shredded. Once I try to get below like 190 pounds, it's pretty damn hard. And I have to be about 180, 183-ish, high 170s, depending on the day on stage to be diced. So anyway, once I was trying to lose those last 10 pounds, man, it was a lot harder. I felt like a zombie. Crazy amounts of cardio. Oh, I also tore my hamstring that year.
Yeah,
That's right.
sprinting. Was that
No, that
oh,
was
different time.
2007. That was a strain, but
Oh.
this was a legit hamstring tear.
Uh,
I tore it in after my first show doing sumo deadlifts. Yeah.
dang.
I was doing a lot of stuff. I was doing sprinting though, which probably set myself up for the tear during deadlift. So I was just doing a lot of stuff that didn't really make sense, and that wasn't something that was prescribed by Lane. He was doing my nutrition and gave me HIIT. Didn't say how to do it, and I was like, well, it seems like a good idea for me not to tell him how I'm training, do heavy deadlifts, and then also sprint flat ground on the same day.
Sensible.
Right, and I had been doing that for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I think it just caught up with me. So anyway, I had a rough year in 2009.
We'll move
But I
on
think
from that then. We'll move on from that. Well, education wise though, so your personal training at that time, and you like when did you decide to go to school to pursue nutrition and all that stuff?
right. So we'll backtrack a little bit. So in the process of being in the Air Force and learning Arabic, you get a crap ton of electives because you
Okay.
spend 2 years in language school. So I had every unit I needed ever done for like the first 2 years of an undergrad, except for non-language or culture-related classes. So what I did was I went to American River College, which is a local JC in Sacramento,
Uh-huh.
ARC.
Yes.
Um, and I think I had to take 6 courses in total before I got my associates. So
Cool.
I took poli-sci, women's history, stats, nutrition, and then I'm forgetting a couple. Took an English and a math test, and they said, "Here is your associates in liberal arts."
Word.
Um, right. I was looking at going to Sac State and doing either the dietetics program or exercise science, but neither one really fit into the idea of what I wanted to do as being a trainer, and it just and I really hated the way it was set up to where one elective required another one. So I looked at it and I had a year where I would have had to take one course a semester because the required courses, because I had all these
We're
credits
only
done.
offered sometimes, huh?
Right. So if I
Okay.
wanted to do exercise science, I would have had to take I want to say calculus. Oh no, trig to get in, which I could only take by itself to finish everything else. So I'm sitting around for a whole semester taking trig, to take calculus, to then take physics, just so I could get into a biomechanics class at Sac State and actually start in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So it was a year or a year and a half of what really felt like wasted time for me, because now that I've actually taken biomechanics at a postgraduate level, you don't need freaking trig and calculus to do biomechanics.
Absolutely not.
Maybe if you want to be a biomechanist, but for an undergrad level biomechanics course and to understand that type of stuff, I mean, you have a master's in exercise phys, you understand. It's Yeah, if you want to go be a biomechanist, sure, but that was not my goal. So I got very frustrated by that. So then I started to look into dietetics, and it's like, man, this is really clinical. And then the same thing happened. I was like, wait, I have to take chemical calculations to get into basic chemistry, to get into OChem, just to start at. Oh, and then there was a biology course I had to take in there too to get into the one of the chemistry courses. So it was again a year and a half of one course at a time that I would have had to take to do dietetics at Sac State. And I was really disillusioned. I was like, this is so stupid. Like, I don't, I'm not going to spend a year taking courses that have nothing to do with where I want to get to, just to get to where I want to get to. And I found a online program at the California University of Pennsylvania, which is a hilarious name because
What?
there's a city called named California in Pennsylvania.
Gotcha.
And this is actually, they were one of the first schools that seriously said, you know what, we need to have like an online degree program. So they're a real university. It's not like University of Phoenix or something like that. And they're known for doing athletic training, so like ATC, ATCL kind of pathways. Pretty good school, and they were ranked very high as far as online schooling at the time in like 2008 when I first started looking at them, 2007, 2008. And they had a online bachelor's degree in sports management with a concentration in fitness and wellness.
Gotcha.
And it was the whole pamphlet and the video that I watched. It was all geared towards: are you a working professional in the fitness industry? Are you currently a personal trainer? Um, and if so, you can take this online while you're working. You have to write. You have to actually show that you're a personal trainer. This is basically NASM, the National Academy of Sport Medicine. They're a certifying body in personal training. They had a partnership with this school, and you would get NASM certifications during your coursework. And you had to show that you were working and write a letter of an application letter, all that stuff. And then uh, if you already had an associate's degree, you could just start straight into the last 2 years of the program, right? So I was like, that's
Wow.
perfect. I've
Yeah.
gotten my associate's degree in liberal arts. I came in, and then in 2008 and 2000, or no, so I finished that up, and then 2009, 2010 is when I did my 2 years and got my bachelor's online from California University of Pennsylvania.
And this is after, right after your second bodybuilding season.
During
During
during and after.
2000. Okay.
Yeah. So I was doing my undergrad coursework online during my 2009 season, and afterwards when we started 3DMJ. I finished my bachelor's in late 2010, early 2011. and I enjoyed it so much that I started my master's at the same university on
Okay.
in an online program.
Okay, so this was the time, 2009, 10-ish, 3D's forming. 3D MJ,
Yep.
the four
So
dudes. How did that all come about? Was this at a bodybuilding show? Online? All
yeah,
of the above?
basically, so I did, like I said, I did 5 shows in 2009. Um, Berto was basically like my wingman throughout that whole prep. He helped me with my cut, my color. Most importantly, he was helping me through the death of my father. He was like literally at my house like every weekend helping me deal with it. Berto had lost someone very close to him in 2008, his good friend,
I remember
while he
that.
was prepping, and so I had kind of stepped in and tried to help him, and so that's how we got so close, is that we really helped each other process our grief and kind of deal with life. Um, so anyway, uh, Berto's my wingman, and we're going to all these shows, and in the third show of the season, second show of the season, this guy Jeff Alberts cleans up the whole thing.
He keeps beating you in those
Um,
overalls, huh?
yeah, so he won his NGA Pro card at the NGA Natural California in 2009. I placed second to the guy who in the heavyweights, Dave Bloomgold, who went against him. Um, And then I was like, oh, wow, Jeff's very impressive. Shook his hand, met him, talked a little bit about his approach, but he was pretty quiet backstage. We didn't know each other. But it was cool to hear that, he wasn't cutting water. He was keeping his intensity pretty high in training, wasn't overdoing cardio, and had a pretty reasonable approach to everything and pretty balanced. And he was talking about how he had retired in 2006 because he'd just been so unhealthy with the sport and wanted to come and do it for himself and do it for the right reasons. And I was like, that sounds familiar, and it's pretty cool. This guy's been competing since the late 90s, and he's coming to many of the same places I've come through a different path, more the experiential side rather than kind of like the learning and reading and internet kind of age stuff. So I had a ton of respect for him. Definitely saw him as someone to look up to, and found out that he had this blog called 3D Muscle Journey. So 3D Muscle Journey literally started just as Jeff's blog of how he got back into bodybuilding for the 2009 season, came out of retirement, was doing it for the right reasons, and it was all about the journey and dedication, desire, and discipline, rather than just trying to get his pro card or just trying to, uh, you know, accomplish something external. Um, yeah, he featured me on his blog, featured Berto. We sent our pictures and all that kind of stuff. We became casually friendly, and then sure enough, we go to the Cap City, which is what was the Muscle Mayhem was called back in 2009.
Right.
Bob and Tina show. This was back when it was a INBF show, before it became a NANBF IFPA show, and now it's
Now
INBF again.
WNBF. Oh yeah, because they're
Right.
together now. WNBF and INBF.
So they used to be sanctioned by the INBF, and then INBF was kind of, I would say, mismanaged in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and they said we don't want any part of that. Switched to the IFPA and their amateur affiliates, and then more recently they said, you know what, we're buying the WNBF, and now they run it, and they got back to their own sanction. But anyway, great show, good people. Muscle Mayhem, probably the best natural show in California, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Um, so anyway, did that show 2009, had a fantastic experience. I won the heavyweight division, and should have been a lighter, but I did well enough to win the class. I still wasn't as lean as I wanted to be, but I was pretty good. Our own harshest critic.
Hmm.
And Jeff won the lightweight class, and a guy by the name of Moji Olua won the middles, right? And then I think Moji won the overall, beat Jeff by a point, and also Brian Bausman was in that overall. So Brian Bausman, Moji Olua, Jeff Alberts, and Eric Helms. That was the 2009 overall of the Cap City in '09. Once again, just very impressed by Jeff. We got to talk a lot more backstage, and just yeah, that was kind of when I think after that I mentioned to Berto, man, we've been talking about doing some coaching together, Berto and I, but that Jeff guy, we should talk to him. Um, Only a month later, we traveled to Washington to do the Washington State INBF show. At the time was ran by Kevin and Denise. Yeah, that's right. And this time again, I won the light heavyweight class. This time I was lean enough. Light
Mm-hmm.
heavyweight, not heavyweight. And Jeff won the lightweight. A guy by the name of Luke Ellis won the heavyweights. And I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember the middleweight winner. My apologies. Or maybe Jeff was a middleweight. Anyway, he was right on the cusp. But in the overall with Jeff again, and Jeff wins the overall, gets his WNBF pro card. And this time we talked the whole time backstage, and we were like, "Oh, we got to get together, do some filming for your blog. We'll show my training because I'm going to do another show in September." And he was like, "That's awesome." He was like, "Dude, you're like a relentless warrior. You've done like so many shows, and before your dad died." And he nicknamed me the Relentless Warrior and did a video of me training in August, and was basically there to support me and help me with my posing uh, up going into the September show that I did to finish my season in '09. So he became kind of a very close friend of mine. He shared with me how he lost his mother during a prep, and so we bonded really like big time. He became like a big brother to me. So Berto, myself, and Jeff became very close, um, and we also became very close with Brad Loomis. So Brad, we met in 2008 when Berto got his WNBF pro card at the Cap City
Okay.
with the
The
Muscle
muscle
Mayhem.
mayhem. Mm-hmm.
We thought Berto was just going to walk in there and clean up and slaughter everybody because he was so lean. And then when the overall happened and Brad walked out next to Berto, we were like, "Oh my God, that's lean. Brad is actually leaner than Berto." Um, and Brad has always been known for bringing insane conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it was actually close, which is saying something because Brad is not as aesthetically built for bodybuilding as Berto is, but was just absolutely peeled and peaked out of his mind. So we got to talking to Brad, stayed in touch. He came and trained with us. He actually knew Jeff. They did a show in 2006 together. So the interwebs of human connection were going. And it was late 2009 that Berto and I pitched the idea of making 3D Muscle Journey into basically an online magazine for natural bodybuilding, maybe doing some coaching on the side to him. And he was, I don't know, think about it kind of thing. And this is right around the same time that the auto plant that he'd been working at for, I want to say 15 years, and that might be a little wrong, closed. And he needed a new career, so he started to take it very seriously. And then we contacted Brad and said, we'd love to work with you too. He'd been a personal trainer, owned a gym, had worked with Skip LaCour, had been a bodybuilder for a long time, was very lean, and had business experience because he was running Healthy Bodies, which is a gym in Portola, which is a
Mm-hmm.
small town outside of Reno on the California side. And so the four of us, basically in late 2009, early 2010, formed what became 3D Muscle Journey. And the kind of online natural bodybuilding magazine side of it never really took off. We interviewed a lot of cool athletes, covered a lot of shows, but it never quite took off. But what did start to take off was the coaching. And so
Okay.
that became more and more emphasized. And we wrote articles, and we would use, back then, there really was only Facebook. YouTube wasn't even big yet. I don't actually remember when YouTube came out, but we didn't really get on there till like 2011.
Okay.
But so yeah, at the time, it was Berto's and my contest prep logs on bodybuilding.com, which had like tens of thousands of views that we would use to drive traffic to 3D Muscle Journey. So we would post articles we wrote there, share our experience, interview athletes, all kinds of stuff, have guest articles. Um, and that was and highlight our coaching. And that was kind of the way we originally drew people towards 3D Muscle Journey website, and also had Facebook pages. So yeah, and that was kind of where it started back then. The equivalent of social media was in the kind of the way that we now use like Facebook groups would be the forums, and now the forums
Okay.
are kind of, oh my god, keep doing that. So the forums have kind of died off. Now social media has changed a lot and will continue to change, and we're trying to do that. But
We are
yeah,
one step at a time.
yeah,
Okay. So 3D happens. Did you always want to, like, from day one when you were like a personal trainer, were you just thinking, I like this fitness thing, I want a career in it? Or were you like, I want to be a bodybuilding coach? Like,
that
how
happened.
specific was it?
it was a big shift. Like I mentioned, the kind of not so guided guy just wants to get big and huge, and was thinking about the IFBB, and being a guy in his very early 20s and playing around with over the counter, for hormones and not knowing how to train. That kind of your typical musclehead gym rat. Once I went to that INBF show, once I competed in the powerlifting meet, and then once I started to read Lane Norton stuff online, I kind of I realized what I wanted to do. I realized, what I want to take. Even then, even though in 2007 I took what I would describe as a very unhealthy approach towards contest prep, I was trying to take a flexible, healthy approach. I was counting macros. I was thinking I was evidence based. I was just very confused, and I don't think I was very emotionally mature at the time. So honestly, right around that late 2006 period was when I was like, I want to mold my career towards being someone who can help the natural bodybuilding community, um, and bring an evidence based, positive message to everyone, bring the community together, and just try to help as many people as possible. That was my goal, and I saw myself as, right, I'm going to do everything I can in terms of experience working with people, competition as an individual, and education to position myself to be the most skilled at doing that. And still working towards that to this day. But
Yeah.
no, it was very clear right around 2006. I kind of had this shift of perspective and clarity, and it went from being this kind of not so healthy, dealing with some issues in my life, towards having direction. Um, so yeah, I really credit natural bodybuilding, which is why I feel the need to give back to natural bodybuilding so much, because it took me off of what I think would have been a pretty negative path in my life and put me on a much more positive version of it. Um,
When you finished your undergrad, you were already there. 3DMJ already existed, and you guys
mhm.
all decided, okay, Eric's going to keep going. He's going to keep pushing and educating and all that stuff. So I find it interesting too, like how you ended up in New Zealand when you want to continue your education. And it seems like a theme with you too. You're like, I want this thing, and I will do whatever it takes to fit that thing. And you do your research or whatever. So it turns out that here we are, New Zealand fit that thing. And tell us about like what America didn't have in place for you and why you're there.
Yeah, so on I always joke that on paper my education looks like completely like that doctor who has like a University of Southeast Nicaragua, MD, right?
Yeah.
It's like printed on printer paper. Like on paper, I have an online bachelor's and master's, and then two foreign degrees. So like it looks crazy, but I just didn't want to compromise with like my goals. So, like I said, I didn't do the Sac State dietetics um, or exercise science thing, because I just felt like I was wasting so much time, and it really wasn't getting me towards where I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
A dietitian, I'm glad I didn't do that anyway, even if I just stuck it out. Exercise science might have been okay, but like when I actually visited Sac State and checked it out, like they had all these posters up, what kind of research they're doing. It's all like cycling studies.
Yeah.
Um, so exercise phys just really wouldn't quite fit. So when I looked at the bachelor's, I was like, you know what? I've been teaching myself all this stuff online anyway. I was learning from the likes of Alan Aragon, Lyle McDonald, and big shout out to Lyle for I think I read every single article on his website, um, and every book he wrote. Um, Lane Norton, Dr. Joe Klimczewski. I was teaching myself all this stuff via being online anyway, and I was like, well, I already know that I would do well in an online learning environment. Some people need to go do the lecture, do all that stuff, but my schedule's crazy. I'm doing 30 hours a week of personal training. I'm training myself to compete. My 2009 season, I had tons of cardio and tons of resistance training. And, so I need a flexible schedule. So I was like, this online learning thing, let's see how it works. It was fantastic. And I molded all of my assignments. So like if we had some classes, it was basically my undergrad was a split between exercise science, nutrition, health and wellness, and then fitness industry specific business and marketing, right? So I actually wrote the 3D Muscle Journey business marketing plan in my sports marketing class.
Okay.
And so, some classes I really couldn't shoehorn something related to what I wanted to do into the work. Like when I took sports law. There's no way to
Yeah.
get around it. You're looking at the NCAA laws on, women's
Title
sport, and
Nine
there's
and shit. Yeah.
right, nothing else you can
Gotcha.
do about it. But like when I took like sport econ, and they said, you have to write or maybe you had to write up an insurance plan. Sounds like the most boring assignment ever. You have to write up an insurance application for putting on an event. And I went, okay, let's figure out what I have to do to put on a bodybuilding show. So I would constantly do things like that to make it fit what I needed my education to be. Um, that's one of the reasons to this day why I will never promote a bodybuilding show. Um, um, but yeah, so I looked into all kinds of stuff like that. Like I made my senior project this annotated bibliography, like a mini lit review of the hormone hypothesis, whether growth hormone actually is causative for muscle growth. And then in my master's, I had my final project. It was also online, same university, was do higher protein intakes protect against muscle loss during dieting and resistance trained athletes, which is where I got the idea for what I wanted to do for my second master's, my actual MPhil. So anyway, I said no to the traditional kind of approach of going to university and doing that, and that was a double-edged sword. The positive side of it was that I learned the theory that was most applicable to what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
I got to pace it to my life and to my needs, and I personally am someone who's very self-driven and self-motivated. I think that worked great for me. A lot of people I would not recommend following the same path, and they would do much better in a traditional university environment. The downside is that once I finished my master's, and I had convinced myself, like, wow, you're doing okay here. Maybe you can take this even further. I want to do my PhD. I had no research experience. I'd never actually been in a lab. I had not been able to have that traditional experience, which leads into doing research like you did in your master's.
Hmm.
So I started looking around, and I was like, all right, well, let's see if I can convince one of these universities to take me on, and I'll take co-recs, I'll take prereqs, whatever I got to do. And I was looking at UC Davis. I was looking at schools in California primarily, and then I realized, 3DMJ is doing pretty well. There's no reason I have to be in California. I could be physically anywhere. I'm gonna walk and talk to you because I need to charge this. But anyway, you
Okay.
can cut that out. But so I was teaching at the time as well. I was in an associate's degree program teaching personal trainers how to personal train. So that was an experience that was giving me even more drive and confirmation that I had the ability to take this as far as I could. I don't know if you've ever taught. Actually, I know you have.
Hmm.
But teaching people is something that you learn more from than people realize.
Absolutely.
So when I was teaching these personal trainers, I realized, I actually have a pretty good talent here with learning the science and explaining it to people and taking the harder to understand stuff and putting it into context. So I was very, very, very motivated to, I want to do a PhD. So I started looking around, and the way a PhD works is you essentially look for, in the States, you look for the researcher, the professor who is doing something that's similar to what you already want to do. And you kind of dovetail off what they're doing, and then hopefully they have funding. Hopefully you have a high enough, score on your, I'm
GRE?
forgetting the name.
GRE?
Yeah, your GRE. Yeah, I took some taking my GREs. I had that terrible experience, So on your GRE, if high enough, if GPA is high enough, you can get in, right? And so I was having a heck of a time finding something that really would I felt would help me become a bodybuilding coach. I respected the hell out of Lane Norton doing his dissertation on, basically mTOR response to leucine in both not only rats but also some human models. But I wanted to work with people. I wanted to train and study bodybuilders and powerlifters, and I couldn't find anything like that. I found some master's degrees that were in strength and conditioning or like sports nutrition, but every PhD was highly clinical. Most of the research was on obesity. Nothing really fit the bill. And one of the guys who I was teaching with at Bryan College, which
where they had the associate's degree program for personal trainers, said, well, dude, if you don't have to be in the States, why don't you look at Australia? They have a bunch of PhDs in sports science, and they heavily fund that. And they're big on strength and conditioning. And Edith Cowan University in Perth, Australia, which is on the west coast of Australia, was being advertised on the NSCA website, actually, as come get your master's online with a brief period in Australia in strength and conditioning. And I was like, wow, strength and conditioning degree, that sounds pretty cool. But I didn't want a master's. I already had that. It looked very similar to the program I already did, basically. So I kept looking around, but I was starting to think big picture, like I can leave the States. And then Brett Contreras, he had a blog post, and the title of it was something about leaving to go get his PhD in strength conditioning, and how he was so glad he lived in a world where that was possible. And I immediately Facebook messaged him, and I was like, where are you getting your PhD in strength conditioning? And he said, I'm doing it at AUT in New Zealand. And I was like, oh, New Zealand. And of course, being the ignorant American like I was like, is that at all related to, Edith Cowan in Australia? And he was like, no, those are actually two different countries, you moron. But he told me that, dude, I can get you in touch with the head of the strength and conditioning department at AUT. It's one of the better schools for strength and conditioning and sports science. And that's where I'm going to be. And he said, Edith Cowan's cool, but did you know that basically all their faculty that was there from 2011 has now moved over to AUT anyway? And I was like, oh. So he got me Skyping with Dr. John Cronin, and who was very, very interested in what I was interested in, mainly because he goes after passion in students. He's not like it's a different system. So they have funding, and they have a lab and funding for research, that is. And you go there and you do whatever you want to study, and you figure out a way to fund it, you figure out a way to get it done, and then you get your degree in what you want to do your research in.
So the opposite of here.
Yeah.
So different.
But the downside is you really have to figure things out on your own. So for example, I had, I think, $500 to fund my master's,
Solid.
my master's research.
Yeah.
So the PhDs are backed by the government here. So you have very, very low fees that you have to pay. So your funding doesn't need to be much. Master's degree is not so much. And I had to do like I talked about earlier, an MPhil.
Mm-hmm.
So because they have a research-based PhD program, they said, well, look, we can't have you do your PhD straight away because you don't have research experience, right? You've got a lot of coursework from your online master's and bachelor's, but you're going to have to do some research before you can do a PhD.
Mm-hmm.
So the option was to do a master's of philosophy, fork out the big bucks, move my whole family of 2 cats and my wife over to New Zealand and figure out a way to do it. So I saved a bunch of money while we were in the States, planning for about a year. I was working on my master's lit review while I was finishing my master's online. So kind of simultaneously doing 2 masters. That was really hard. While teaching 30 hours a week, personal training,
Wow.
about 15 hours a week, doing my 2011 contest prep, and coaching people through 3DMJ. It was by far the busiest I've ever been in my life. I don't think I had more than 2 hours a day of free time, maybe 3 hours. And that was, I'd come home, Barb and I would eat dinner, watch TV, and go to bed.
Yeah.
And she was in school and working as a dog trainer. But we saved enough money. We flew ourselves out and depleted that money extremely quickly. I was able to get a stipend for my MPhil, very small student loan, which I paid off very quickly, and used the last bit of my GI Bill to get through the Masters of Philosophy, which is a year long, where I basically just did my proposal, recruited my subjects, did my research, published the papers, did it, defended, and finished in, I guess that was the end of 2013 before I was then able to get into the PhD, which I started back in early 2014.
Man. And we have a year left.
Right. So I am, so it's pretty cool. Like I found a very circuitous pathway to get to doing research. The reason why I didn't just stop at my master's, because, on paper, nobody, to be a bodybuilding coach, if you have a bachelor's degree, man, you're ahead of the game. You
just
gotta
need like a lot of Instagram followers and you're set, really.
Yeah, you need a nice ass or a nice set of shoulders and Instagram followers, and you can be a bodybuilding coach if you've been on stage like once,
Pretty
and
much.
you use the right filter.
You just need good pictures, really.
Just good filters or just
Yeah,
Photoshop skills.
that's
You
true.
don't actually even need to lift.
Yeah, so why the PhD if you don't want to teach in a university forever or get tenure or whatever? So why the PhD if you don't want to be like a tenured professor for the rest of your life? I guess is the big question.
Yeah, man. Why anything though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, why bodybuild? Why lift weights? If to me, it's I'm trying to make myself the best I can possibly be in the path that I see for me.
Mm-hmm.
And if my goal that I set out back in 2006 was to be the person who could have a positive impact and help as many people as possible in our community, then why not, and have the best understanding. And I won't lie either. There's a little bit of a competitive nature in me. I very much want to be like the man when it comes to this kind of like the evidence-based information for bodybuilding and powerlifting.
Uh-huh.
I've always looked, Lyle or Lane or Dr. Joe or even though they're kind of like anti-gurus, they're like, it's all about the science, not about me. I've always looked at them and been like, man, they've gotten themselves to a position where they are the authority on that information. And I think that has been a driver for me as well, but it's not the main driver. It's just kind of cool, but primarily I want to continue to put myself in the best position to achieve that goal that I set out 10 years ago.
So is it like the skills that you'd have to acquire within getting your PhD make you feel like you're a better coach, or is it the credibility that comes with it overall as an authority figure, or a combination of all that, or just being like, hey, there's nothing more I could do. I did the best I could. There is nothing above a PhD, but I got that done. So, right.
A little bit of that last part, but a big thing about giving back to a community in an evidence-based sense is not just disseminating the information, reading research and explaining it to people,
Mm-hmm.
but actually producing it,
Right.
So I actually I forgot to mention this. Another part of the way that I funded my MPhil and the trip out to New Zealand was I basically crowdsourced it.
I remember this.
So I made and I still to this day, and I'm incredibly thankful to anyone who's watching who donated. I would have literally been sleeping in a car. I don't know. Like I raised a little over $5,000 from people gave me $5,000
from YouTube.
to do. Yep.
I remember the video. Yeah, because you moved from California a few months before I got there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. So I saved as much money as I could, and when it really came down to it, it is just so incredibly expensive to move, put a down payment on a security deposit on a place, get a couple cars, get a couple phones, get set up, buy furniture, because you can't move your house to New Zealand. Buy the plane. The plane tickets are incredibly expensive. So everything we had to do, it just completely depleted our funds. And then it's not like Barb can immediately start a job up when she gets there. She wasn't able to start paid work for a year. So basically I had to make it work on just the 3DMJ income, which was not, it was solid, but it wasn't as solid as these days now that we're more established. So yeah, I crowdsourced, funded it. I got a stipend. We saved a ton of money. And anyway, to answer the question, why am I doing the PhD? It's because this is really the only way to do research. There are other ways. If you know PhDs and you can, hook up with them and stuff like that and be part of research projects. But essentially an MPhil or a PhD, especially in this system, is 1 or 3 years of doing research. You have access to the labs, you can recruit, you can have ethics through the university body. And I've had the opportunity to do the best I could, and the best I will continue to do to put out research that is directly relevant to competitive bodybuilders and powerlifters, to help them, succeed and have the healthiest approach and most evidence-based approach as possible. So that's the real reason is I can I can disseminate the work of other people. And I do that all the time. Most of the time when I'm talking about research, it's not my own.
Which is difficult, man. I think people underestimate. There's a difference between reading research and understanding, all the
Yep.
time.
And people get it wrong all the time.
God, I read this one study. I'm like, no, don't say that. Don't say that. Like when they preface any conversation with like, well, this one study said, I'm like, oh God. But we'll
Yeah.
talk about that later. But okay, so speaking of helping as many people as possible, what did we do this year together, Mr. Helms? In the past 6 months of our lives.
Well, we wrote the Muscle and Strength Nutritional Pyramid and Training Pyramid with Andy Morgan.
We did. We wrote them, but you created that. And so so 2013 was the nutrition pyramid, right?
Yep.
2015 was the training. And yep. I can honestly say I'm not alone in this. And I told you this when I said, hey, we got to write this, that is by far probably the most valuable thing put on the internet for anyone in muscle and strength, for bodybuilders, powerlifters. I know they could just read the foreword of the introduction or get a free chapter at muscleandstrengthpyramids.com. But why, how did that come about in your brain and why was it so important?
Yeah. So going back to this whole broke student during my MPhil thing, barely not living out of a car, is I was basically, I had to work full time through 3DMJ, and we had started about a year prior our Skype consultation program, which is unlike week to week reporting. With clients, it's often people who you're talking to for the first time and they're looking to kind of get an organized plan. And damn it, if it wasn't 90% of the people I talked to who just had the same issues. Well-intentioned, hardworking, even intelligent people, because a lot of the times, we create our own social media bubble. So people who are seeking me out for information, they already kind of have an evidence-based tilt, and they more or less have the right direction. They're not coming to me randomly like they would to like, hey, I want to work with, Kai Green or something like that, but they would constantly have their priorities out of order and be incredibly confused by just the amalgamation of everything online. And we're just doing all kinds of wacky stuff. And none of it was exactly wrong. It was just misprioritized. So I think after the 30th person over, a multi-month period, I was like, okay, I am actually tired of giving the same consultation. I'm just going to make it into a series, So I decided to do the everything tutorial for the most important stuff for nutrition. And I spent a long time planning it, figuring out the relationship, the hierarchy. I read a ton of research actually. And it coincided with while I was writing evidence-based recommendations for natural bodybuilding, nutrition, and supplementation, which is a publication I did with Alan Aragon and Peter Fitchen.
Which is incredibly useful. We'll link that somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was something. So I was doing those at the same time, and I was like, how can I really kind of take this 7,000-page review with over 100 references and put it into something that the average YouTuber who watches the 3DMJ channel would be able to digest and get benefit from. And so I started recording it, and it was just me in the small conference room at AUT with a whiteboard and my S3 propped up against a chair. So, yeah. And
I guess what was the response? Because I was one of those people that watched it for the first time and my mind just went like, but what was, was that like a big shift in your career and like, holy shit, I do know what I'm doing. Oh my God, I got this. Like, or was it kind of like, what was the response from people and how did you feel after making that?
I think it was a shift in my career for other people, but,
that's a good point.
Yeah, for me, honestly, I think where I really built my confidence and I felt like, I can actually be useful to a large audience was when I was teaching at that personal training college. I just can't emphasize enough how much teaching made me really learn the stuff I thought I knew I learned,
Yeah.
I mean, this was, again, after kind of the economy was recovering. So I was teaching to a mix of 18-year-olds who didn't want to go through traditional education and 45-year-olds who were trying to find a new career because their whatever their whole career blew up because of the economy, and trying to teach. And I'm basically dead middle. I'm in my late 20s and unable to really identify with either group and have to figure out a way to explain the stuff I know to them. That's when I really learned my shit, and learned it in a practical sense. So through that year and a half of teaching at Bryan College, I honed my skills and really solidified my knowledge and kind of understood the foundation on a level that didn't even know I could get to. And then I think the pyramids just allowed me to display that, I guess.
Okay. So you went from a coach to like an authority relaying information. Not, I mean, in everyone's brain, maybe necessarily. I mean, you've always been a coach, but it was just that extra level of he can deliver this information.
Yeah, I think, and I don't want to sound arrogant at all, but I like to point out Neil deGrasse Tyson as, I don't know if he's the best physicist in the world. I don't follow, cosmology enough, but he is very, very, very good at delivering complex topics in an interesting way in physics to everyone, and they can digest it. And I'm not saying I'm freaking Neil deGrasse Tyson, but I've looked at that and gone, that's a very useful skill. It's a slightly different skill than just being a scientist or just being a coach. So I kind of wear a lot of hats. I think I try to disseminate information to our community to help everyone. I obviously try to be the best coach I can be on a one-on-one basis with the athletes I work with. And then I also try to be a scientist, which I'm doing for my PhD and for other side projects. And I'm also an athlete. So they all have a whole bunch of interactions and they inform the other pieces. Like I run into a lot of scientists who make some very in my mind, non-common sense based conclusions because they have no practical experience. I run into some people who only have practical experience who could be doing things better if they just understood kind of the underlying mechanisms of what they were doing or had a more scientific-y, method-y kind of logical approach to the way they thought. And I run into athletes who aren't very good sportsmen and sportswomen. So they don't really know their stuff. They're just kind of following blindly. And so I guess I've been trying to combine all those elements to make it maximally digestible to the broadest audience possible within our very small community. So,
well, just so you know, you're doing a good job of all those things. Don't know if the whole internet's told you that yet, but we appreciate you. So then going forward, I want to know about all those hats that you wear and where they're all going. So can we start with you as an athlete? Where are we now and what's like the 1 year, 5 year plan or something like that?
Great question. Yeah. So the funny thing is that back in the day, I used to put, I was primarily known as an athlete. I had logs and blogs and all that stuff. My training stuff was all over the boards. And that's really, that was the biggest and primary hat I wore. And even when I was a personal trainer, I wasn't working with bodybuilders, so I didn't really have a whole lot to share there. So anyway, I have been doing 2 to 3 powerlifting meets here in New Zealand with their IPF affiliate since 2013. I've competed in New Zealand Nationals 3 times, and I'm planning on doing that this year as well. I am competing in North Island Championships next month, and then Nationals in August. And then if I do well enough at Nationals, I might represent New Zealand in the Oceania competition, which was going to be in Samoa, but now it's going to be in Christchurch. So it's kind of like an Australasia international comp sanctioned by the IPF. I'm a 93 kg powerlifter, and hoping to total in the mid 600s. So I'm no frickin', like phenom. I'm like, 400 Wilks-ish. So I'm a solid above average powerlifter. Which, man, it's gotten incredibly competitive. I remember when the Arnold Invitational only required a 375 Wilks to get to. And now I think it requires you to have a 435. So powerlifting has grown so much in the time since I started lifting.
So while Eric eats his bar, I'm going to speak for him. I'm just kidding. So is the reason that you've been doing so much powerlifting, is it because prep is cray-cray and you're trying to get a PhD and that's also slightly cray-cray?
Yes.
Okay.
Partially.
So
as I if someone could pick up from my ramblings earlier, I competed in 2011 during my first Masters.
Right. So you did 7, 9, 11 for the years.
Got
Okay.
it.
Got
Right.
it.
So 2009, I would start my bachelor's. 2011, I was finishing up my first Masters and teaching at Bryan College, coaching, and working on my lit review for what became my Masters here in Auckland. So that was, like I said, the busiest I've ever been in my life. I succeeded. I did 2 shows and placed second to the overall winner, a guy named Jeff Kalo, in a INBA show in August in Northern California. I'm forgetting exactly which show. And then I did the Nevada State, I think the weekend after that or 2 weeks later, and I won the overall and got
Yay.
I got PNBA Pro qualified in 2011 in late August. And then I was like, done. uh, so I looked up and I went, right. So if I'm going to be going to a foreign country and spending 4 to 5 years doing my graduate work there, I was successful doing my master's and my contest prep and all this stuff, but it wasn't ideal. I didn't have much free time. I wasn't happy. I wasn't very balanced, and
Yeah.
I need to put on a way more muscle anyway. So let's wait until I'm not going to do my pro debut until I get out of my graduate work. And I called up the INBA central office and I just basically said, hey, I'm going to go do my PhD. It might be 3 or 4 years before I compete again. Will I be able to compete as a pro when I get back? And they basically said, yeah.
They thought we were hard and were like, nah, well, why not? Okay. Word.
Yeah.
Tell me about.
Again,
Oh, go ahead.
some of the natural bodybuilding organizations are very kind of mom and pop. And they probably won't even remember that conversation. That was 2011. So who knows? I'm hoping that I will be able to just put in my entry fee, show evidence of the fact that I won that show in 2011, and compete in either 2017 or 2018 as a pro in a PNBA show. My ultimate goal is really just to get on stage with the rest of the guys, and hopefully you, if that's ever possible.
We got a few years.
At the same time, it'll be difficult because I'm not a pro in the same organization as them. So like this, I have to figure out where can a PNBA pro card allow me to compete, and if I can get into the NGA, then can I use my NGA to compete in the IFPA or whatever? So it's going to be some kind of nonsensical trading of pro cards until I can get on the same stage as them. But it'll either work out or it won't. But I do want to compete in the pros at least once to see how I do at the best I can be at this point as a 33, 34-year-old guy by the time I do it, and see if I want to keep competing or not. See if I still have that same competitive drive. But I'm definitely will keep doing powerlifting for sure.
Okay. Would you say that that's because it's a bigger love of yours, or because it's less invasive to your career goals and all that stuff? Like you saying, for sure, I'll always do powerlifting.
I love them both, but
Okay.
it is the latter.
Okay.
They're very different. Like powerlifting, it feels like a real sport,
Right. Mm-hmm.
You either lift the weight or you don't. A bodybuilding prep is like a existential transformative experience where you're pushing yourself way past your comfort zone and coming out on the other side and seeing if you survived, kind of thing. It's incredibly emotional.
Yeah.
And it is very, very difficult to not let it consume your life. And that challenge is very, in this kind of semi-masochistic way, extremely intriguing and inviting to me. It's kind of like same reason someone would want to climb Everest or, any of the things that people do that just seem painful and hard. Like, why do you want to climb that mountain? Because it's there. Why do you want to compete in the bodybuilding show? Because I want to see if I can do it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling, even though I'm not as enthused about competing in natural bodybuilding as I was, say, in 2011, 2009, or 2007, I do want to get back on stage, compete with the pros to see how I do, and then just see what it feels like. If it still has that internal drive, then I'll keep doing it. But it definitely, even when done as healthily as possible, it takes energy.
It's invasive.
From life.
Even yeah. That's it.
Even when done right, it takes a large chunk of your energy and focus,
Hmm.
and that's something that um, I like, but I don't like every year. I might like
Yeah.
it in 2011, 2017, 2025. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
And you
yeah,
dabbled in Olympic lifting the last few years too.
yeah.
We snicker because dabble is the right word.
Dabble is about as strong as you can get with it. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, yeah. Most of the time, you're supposed to be like an 8-year-old when you start Olympic lifting to get the mobility and the timing and everything right. I started at 30. Uh,
Close enough.
yeah,
Yeah.
I did okay. I have issues with being able to be in this position while being also in a deep squat. So I had like my power snatch was as good as my snatch. Um, I never got the timing on my jerk right. I could clean a lot more than I could jerk. Um, I really enjoyed it. It gave me a different perspective on training. I
Hmm.
mean, the Olympic lifts are inherently squats, and I was doing the Olympic lifts 3 times a week and squatting 3 times a week. It's like front squat, back squat, clean and jerk, snatch, 5 days a week of training. And I started to realize just how much we were confining ourselves to what we thought were the rules of training. Like for so long, it was you don't train more than once a week, right? And there's this crazy thing called HST where you train, full body, Monday, Wednesday, Friday kind of thing, and that's Brian Haycock's thing, but we don't know. He says it's evidence based, but it just seems against the rules. And then fat comes out, Lane Norton's fat, power hypertrophy, adaptive training, or whatever, and it's like 2 times a week. Oh my God, this is high frequency.
Hmm.
And every other athlete on the planet is going, is 2 times a week really that high a frequency of training the same body part?
Yeah.
Gymnasts train their full body every day, and
Hmm.
so even though I was reading the research and I was seeing that there was there was no rules that you couldn't train muscle groups more than twice a week, it was something that was so ingrained in my past experience. Um, I'd never really done it, and when I went to do Olympic lifting, I was just straight up like, look, just give me Olympic lifting. I'm just going to do it like I'm an Olympic lifter, and I'll bench on Sundays just to keep it.
Yeah.
And I did that for a while, um, and I just realized that we're just so much more adaptive than we realize, and when you balance intensity, volume, and frequency, you can make a efficacious high frequency program if you control intensity and volume, or if you overreach for a period and back off, or whatever. Um, so that was actually a very good experience for me there. I also learned a lot about the Olympic lifts. I work with some Olympic lifters now, not for training, but for nutrition.
Hmm.
The eye and the technical skill for being a good Olympic lifting coach takes years to develop. But it was really good to see a different culture around programming, and yeah, it's a cool strength sport. I think it's very neat. And if I had been more mobile and less frustrated by just the ability to get into the positions, I would probably still be doing it. I really do enjoy the lifts themselves, but it was more frustrating than it was enjoyable, and I was still progressing in powerlifting, so it was difficult to watch my total go from 1300 to 1350 to now approaching 1400. And my Olympic lifting total is going from terrible to less than awful to bad.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
and I was basically kind of having to put powerlifting semi on hold, while I was doing Olympic lifting. So eventually, I told my coach Adam Story, like, hey, I think can we transition me being a powerlifter? And he was totally cool with that. And he's a great. When he was still doing my programming, he did a great job either way. He's just an awesome S&C. And he's also the secondary supervisor on my PhD. He's basically got a PhD in Olympic weightlifting, and he's one of the strength and conditioning coaches in New Zealand who's top of the game.
That is so cool that we can't major in sports here in America. I think that's so cool that the rest of the world does that. Okay. Um, so career wise, okay, so we're looking at maybe as an athlete, maybe physique again in the next 1 to 3 years. As soon as you're done, we'll hit bodybuilding stage. Well,
Bodybuilding.
not male physique, but like physique sports. Going
Yeah.
back to a physique athlete. I know you're not going to get in board shorts. I realize that. Only the Speedos for Helms. And then powerlifting forevers because we love it. And then as a career, you graduate, you have your PhD, you stay and keep researching, you come back, you teach, what do you want to do?
Things won't change much for me when I get my PhD. I'm really doing this for the love. A lot of people, their PhD opens career doors for them. It might open some for me, but
I think yours are
my
plenty
goal,
open.
yeah. Um, I want to keep writing. I want to keep producing content online to help people. I want to keep coaching. Um, I want to keep speaking internationally. I really enjoy that, being able to travel around the world and talk to people about things. And I definitely want to stay involved in research. So I wouldn't become a full professor, but my goal is to maintain a relationship with AUT to where I could supervise master's and PhD students,
That's awesome.
which would keep me in the lab. And I would basically take on master's and PhD students who wanted to come to AUT, who were interested in strength sport or physique sport in some capacity or things related to that. And I had some experience with that now. As a PhD student, I had some time to supervise a couple master's students. A gentleman just submitted by the name of Daniel Glassbrook, shout out to DG. He did his master's on high bar squats and low bar squats and the differences in terms of biomechanics, kinetics, kinematics, and electromyographic activity.
Say that 5 times fast.
No. High bar squats and low bar squats. We took some high level or some relatively skilled powerlifters and Olympic lifters and compared the way they squatted, which is pretty cool. And we're submitting some of his stuff. His master's is in review at the moment, and I'm sure he will finish. And then earlier in 2015, I was part of the supervisory team for another master's student, Simon Chatterton. Big shout out to SC. Who
Those are such creative nicknames you have.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed, it's the first name and then the last name put together is just the letters.
The last one too, huh? Man,
yeah, the initials.
That's crafty. Okay.
Thank you. And he did his master's on basically high-fat, low-carb diets in strength athletes, and the effects of like an 8-week period of being on what some might consider ketogenic diet, but kind of borderline, and the effect on strength, mood, performance, body fat, all that stuff.
That's so cool. And your dissertation is on what? That we're in the middle of collecting data for. What's coming out?
Yeah. Right now I'm writing up, and I'm going to be collecting data soon. So it's actually called a thesis here. For some reason, it's a little different.
Okay.
Whether you're doing a master's or a PhD, it's considered a thesis.
Okay.
The dissertation title is actually reserved for bachelor's with honors, so an undergrad but postgraduate research project. So it's just a little different.
Okay.
Anyway, my dissertation, if you want to call it that, is on autoregulation in powerlifting. So specifically looking at usage of a modified RPE scale based on like what Mike Tuchscherer popularized, where how many repetitions you have at the end of a set dictates the RPE. So like a 10 is absolute max, couldn't have done more weight or more reps. 9 is I could have done one more rep. 8, 2, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And how that compares to using a percentage-based system. And I've also done some stuff looking at velocity-based training. So at what velocities do different lifts and trained lifters, how does that correlate with percentage 1RM, RPE? What velocity do you max out at, that kind of thing, and how that could be used in programming. But my PhD is probably going to be around 8 to 10 chapters and a couple lit reviews, a couple articles. Some are coming out very soon. I just did data collection from July till January. That's going to turn into a couple studies. And I'm actually very soon going to be going out to Florida with Dr. Mike Zerdos.
Shout out to MZ.
MZ.
I was on it. All right.
You're all over it. So I'll be out there with Mike at Florida Atlantic University, where he runs a great program. He has the skeletal muscle physiology lab where they look at a lot of resistance training application-based research with his master's students. And he's my tertiary supervisor on my PhD, good friend, and we're going to go collect. He's going to be starting this collection soon. We're working on an IRB now. I'm going to go live in Florida in Boca Raton area for like 10 weeks, and we're going to do a study on RPE versus percentage 1RM and outcomes in body fat, muscle mass, and strength. and people doing squats and bench press.
So cool, because y'all already did the deadlift.
Well, the deadlift poses some problems as far as injury risk and time and constraints, and so much of this is we're just trying to look at the concept of programming with one versus the other. I mean, I think it's useful to use the squat and the bench press because they're very common. They're probably some of the most commonly done exercises, but we could have done it with a row and overhead press, and it would have been the same concept of comparing percentage 1RM versus RPE. But yeah, we want it to be more applicable to powerlifting and bodybuilding as well. So yeah, it's more logistical stuff. You can't really encapsulate everything you want in one study. No one study can save the world, kind of thing. Yeah.
But this one time I read this study that said, I'm just kidding.
And it's right. It has to be right.
Yeah. Okay. So is there anything that you feel like the people need to know that I didn't ask you about in your whole life history? In all we're almost at 2 hours. Almost.
They don't need to know any of this shit, man.
Yeah, they do. They do, though. Well, I feel like, you're out there so much with your information and doing your job, basically your life's work. But what people don't know about you, aside from you being such an intense breakdancer and rapper, which actually people are learning more and more about, but I'm not going to keep going on that, is you kind of enjoy your privacy a little bit more than the typical fitness professional nowadays. Like we had to coax you into an Instagram account recently. Follow this guy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll give you a little bit of my personal philosophy there is
I think it's interesting, yeah.
Now, if you're someone who we're talking about the hats you wear. If the only hat you wear is an athlete, the best contribution you can give to the field is your experience, like for example, Matt Ogus, I think a lot of people have benefited from seeing the things he's gone through in and out. And like yourself, when you were doing YouTube more regularly, before you came on and you're doing the AV Fit stuff, like being able to see someone's journey, it helps people normalize their experience. It helps them to know what's coming, what to expect, helps them find out what their passions are. And I think that's very valuable. But it also comes with a lot of negative stuff. It can, people, if you are vulnerable, some people will want to exploit that. And if you show yourself, some people can be judgmental. I mean, I just don't really care to have people who have opinions about me. Honestly, I do my thing and I want to be me. And I don't want people out there to think that they know me when they don't really, as odd as that might sound. And I don't have to do it anymore now that I'm not just an athlete. I can give them information. Yeah. I can give them my perspective as a coach. And that to me feels much more comfortable. I don't need someone to see me making meals in my living room or going out to dinner with my wife. That's right. That's my personal time. And the thing I very much, I'm not judging anyone who does that. And I think that's great. But it's not the way I want to live my life. And even if you look at my Instagram account, each post has a purpose. It's either, haha, that's funny. That makes me laugh and makes me happy. That's useful information, or that's a good perspective, Mm-hmm. And I would say probably my most valuable contribution to the field is the Angle Game series on Instagram.
Yeah. Pyramids are a close second, but that Angle Game is definitely up there.
Yeah, I mean that's probably one of the most important pieces I've ever done in my life. So, 10-part series. Check it out on Instagram. Angle Game. Hashtag
Helms.
never. Hashtag Angles and Demons. So, but no, I think that's just me. And I think when I was younger, I wanted more attention. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted recognition. But it's a funny thing, like when you're in that more, for me at least, it was a rather immature state where you're looking for external validation. You're also more vulnerable and more sensitive to external critique, Yeah. Like if you think about it, you're like, oh, I need love, right? So then if you get the opposite of that, it hurts that much more.
Yeah.
So I it's funny now that I don't feel I need as much external validation. I don't put myself out there because I'm not looking for it.
Right.
So so now it's like if someone asks me, why aren't you on Instagram like posting selfies? And it's like, why would I be? I don't understand.
I know. We're like, come on, Helms, come on. We can't tag you in shit. Like that was our big argument. Is like we can't tag you anything. That was
Yeah.
But it's just another outlet for information, you know. And I just want to I know you get acknowledged like by people who do podcasts all the time, but I know that you're our family and we love you, and everything you do makes us super proud.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much.
No problem.
It's awesome being able to have this conversation with you and getting to share everything. And yeah, I just hope people can, you know, like I did say, the value of someone who does kind of vlog their life. I do understand the way 3DMJ started was from myself, Berto, Jeff, Brad sharing our personal experiences because that's what we had at the time.
Right.
And I think that generated a lot of compassion and community, and that's something I think we need to do more of. So that's why I'm willing to come on here and talk about my mindset when I was 22 and paths that regrets I have in my life and paths I wish I had never even started on, but they're the reason why I am the man I am today and things like that. So
yeah, and I super look forward to, because this is the first ever 3DMJ podcast, but that's I'll have said this at the beginning, I'm sure, and they would have all heard it, but that's the whole point of this is because of all those great social media things, everything does seem snippet based, and I think all five of us have a lot to contribute in the long form with interviews like this and with the longer discussions, and that's something that I've always appreciated about 3D. When I was a little fangirl watching y'all in my bedroom back in the day, like 2012-ish, when I found you guys, was I could watch athletes doing their thing and posing and whatever, but it was different hearing you on that protein roundtable back with Ian McCarthy back in the day. Like
shout out to IM.
Oh yeah, of course, shout out.
I was also on there with Alan Aragon.
Yeah, AA, if you will.
Shout out to AA.
But I know that there's people that will very much benefit from, I can't even say all five of us, but just bantering back and forth. And if that is one thing that I can say, as much as I loved the vlogging and you loved your forum posts, it's that discussions need to be made. And that's why I love you guys, and that's why again, the fly on the wall concept is important, because every time, oh, hi, who's that? Which child is this?
That's Bucky.
Oh, Bucky.
He's like doing way too much time not paying attention to me. Oh.
Yeah, if you're just listening, we're witnessing a cat up close and personal. Is that there's room for discussion in the sport, and I think if nothing then the pyramids did was just show the gray area. And I can't wait to bring that to everybody with all you guys. So that is it.
Well, dude, you're a very, very welcome addition to the team, and I think you are so much a true blood of 3DMJ that it's like you've always been there in my mind.
Aww. Can we end on that? That was really nice.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Well, thanks, Eric, and we'll see you in a couple weeks, yeah? And thank
you
everyone for listening. Talk to y'all soon.
Much appreciated.
Uh-huh.
Cool.
Bye.